None of what you think matters. Attention from girls doesn't matter. Your ability at sports doesn't matter. Your ability to be creative doesn't matter. What people think of you doesn't matter. None of those things truly matter. If you want to be happy, be like the best friend to yourself that you possibly can be. And if I had someone in my life who talked to me the way I talk to me, I would think they were the worst person, the most evil, vile person in the world. So why do I allow that to happen? And so I'd say my 45-year-old self goes back to my 15-year-old self and be like, could you just be nice to yourself? That's actually all that matters. Just be nice to yourself.
It's Johnny Late Night! And now here's your host, Johnny Rogers! Welcome back, everyone, to the Johnny Rogers Show. It's episode number 79. I'm back at it again with another one of my friends in comedy who has his own podcast called Starting Out. But before I get into that, please make sure you go to patreon.com/The Johnny Rogers. You can subscribe there for as low as $2 a month. It was $1, but inflation, so they upped it to $2 a month, but I still think it's affordable, and you get all these episodes ad-free and exclusive before anyone else. So that's a fun little club that you can join. But my guest today, we did an awesome show together at Absolute Comedy. We were talking about podcasting. As I mentioned, he has his own podcast called Starting Out. He's also a stand-up comedian. So ladies and gentlemen, give it up for my friend and yours, Nick Durie.
Oh, what's up? What a lovely little intro, Johnny. That was nice. I like that.
A little improv intro so they can get to know you first off.
I like it. Thanks, man. It's a pleasure to be on the show.
Yeah, happy to have you here. So your word was validation, and you said that it kind of, I don't know if I don't want to put words in your mouth, but aligned with what Gavin Stevens, who was a former guest on the podcast as well. You can go back and listen to that episode. Maybe I'll put a thing here that shows it.
Yeah. You and Gavin were talking about, the validation that you get or that you seek from in this business, in the stand-up business, the validation from audiences, the validation from the industry. Like, you're just constantly seeking validation.
When you have those feelings of jealousy or anger or whatever, envy, you understand, like, why do you have that? Because you're just looking for someone to validate you as a comedian or whatever. So it's like, that our industry is driven on that, of like validating us because we are the product.
And I was gonna, when you tasked me with like choosing a word, it was more about my life and about a change in my life that the word validation resonates with me. And that's the shift from seeking external validation to trying to develop internal validation. So that's the way, because that's been a big, I turned 40, I'll be 46 in a couple months. In my 40s, I'm trying to do a lot of work on my mental health. And a lot of it really is centered on trying to develop some semblance of validating myself internally without seeking it externally. And I have no idea how to do it. I'm in therapy to try to figure it all out. But it's, and then you couple that with the fact that we are comedians, like what you and Gavin were talking about, where it is all about validation and seeking external validation and how to sort of parse those two things out together. That, I couldn't think of another word that I wanted to use than that.
No, it's a really great word. And I mean, like, it's something I think about a lot too. It's like same issue that you're talking about, of wanting to find that validation internally, because man, validation externally is just so satisfying. It's like it's like the fast food of feelings, right? Internal validation is more like you cooked yourself a healthy meal and you feel good after that, but it doesn't hit the same right away. Right. You know what I mean? So I think that's why there's such a strong pull to it, is because it invokes so much feeling in us. But I do understand that there is such an importance of like that balance of being like, but if all of that goes away, am I still okay with where I'm at? And can I reassure myself of that constantly? And I battle with that a lot, like I said, but like I found the internal validation became easier for me when I read I'm forgetting the name. His name is Mark Mason. It's like Stop Giving a Fuck, or
How to Stop Giving a Fuck.
How to Stop Giving a Fuck. Yeah. It's such a good book. Like, I flew through it because I was like, I was like, this is what I've been missing. It's just
right.
It's not to say like you're gonna start being rude to people, but you just are so validated by your own growth and success that you don't
Yeah.
really care what other people are saying about you because it doesn't matter ultimately.
Yeah. Well, what kind of a kid? Like, sorry, I haven't been a guest on a podcast in a really, really
Yeah,
long
yeah, you're
time,
interviewing me
and
now.
so yeah, there's
Flip it
but
on
like
you. What
what?
kind of a kid were you?
So it stopped me from doing that because it will be my
I do
tendency
it all the
being.
time too when I go on people's podcasts.
It's awful. Did you have good like self confidence as a kid?
No, no, not bad. I was like a
Okay.
shy kid because I
Hmm.
was scared of what people were going to say if I said something.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
it was like
Yeah.
one of those things. And then doing stand-up comedy was really me fighting against that, being like, fuck that. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just going to do it. And
Sure.
I don't really care if people like it or don't like it. It's something I want to do.
Yeah.
And so I've tried to keep pursuing that kind of attitude of like, I'm just going to do what I want to do when it comes
Mm.
to, you know, my life,
Yeah. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to get overly like, psychoanalysis here or but whatever. But like I grew up in a small town just outside of Ottawa, and
Same.
I was the oldest of three kids, and my parents divorced when I was 5,
Mm.
and I was the only kid in my school, in my small little school, whose parents were divorced for a while.
Oh, that
And so
sucks.
like just like at 5, 6, like feeling there was something inherently different or wrong or weird
Yeah, yeah.
about me. And then like as I'm doing this mental health work as an adult, realizing like we form so many opinions of ourselves at such a young age when we don't have the intellectual capacity to properly assess what's going on. We just sort of think, hey, there's something weird and different about me. And then all we're able to do is look for external examples to validate that opinion of ourselves. And so I had
Hmm.
terrible self confidence growing up and really wanted to be cool and really wanted to be liked, really wanted to have friends, and really wanted to be good at sports and really wanted to have girlfriends. Like, and was just so desperately trying to be cool that I was so uncool and just seeking all that external validation, all that like attention, and not even attention, just validation, I suppose, from external sources without developing any of it for myself. So now I sit here as a 45-year-old and I'm like, holy shit, this could be a really sad second half of my life if I don't try to find a little bit of peace. If I'm just constantly looking to work or my lovely girlfriend or friends or comedy to validate my feelings and my existence, it's like I have to do some serious work in my 40s if I'm gonna find a little bit of peace in my, beyond
Yeah.
beyond this age.
Well,
So
and I think it's about like finding I think a way to internally validate like beyond something that and it's strange because when you say internal, people think like, well, then you can't externally engage with anything else. Internal is just
right,
conversations with yourself. And you're like, well, there's
right,
some people
right.
that don't have those conversations even, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, like you can sit there and tell yourself all day that like what you're doing is amazing, but I find like the best internal validation is like a passion project,
Mm.
whether that's like I'm gonna take jujitsu until I get to a blue belt or something, and I don't care
Yeah,
how long,
yeah,
you
right.
know, or like
Yeah,
I'm gonna learn how to do this, and you have a lot
yeah,
of fun in that process where there's no stakes really, other than your own
sure.
what you set for yourself. I
Yeah,
think that's been like a huge thing
yeah,
for me.
yeah. That's interesting. I didn't even really think of it in that context, but I think I was 41 or 42 and I started boxing and
Mm,
I never boxed before. Right. And I'm obviously like, I'm not in great shape and I was always coordinated and good at sports, but I can't do the things that I used to be able to do in your
of
40s and with
course,
a
yeah,
little bit of
yeah.
weight on, right? And so and I think I stuck with it because of stand up because I realized from starting stand up at a later age, I started at 37 and learning that you're going to be bad at something and reconciling that you're bad at something before you're good at it kept me in boxing because I was like, okay, I'm going to be terrible at something, but if I stick with it, maybe I can develop something down the road. Do you know what I mean?
I
And
wish I knew that as a kid.
yeah,
I
I know, me
quit
too. Yeah,
so many
yeah,
things
I
because I
know.
sucked at it.
Because it
And I
sucks
thought,
sucking at things. It
yeah,
sucks. It's
but
terrible.
you're told almost that like within every discipline, it's not like explicitly told. It's something that you just
Right.
kind of recognize that within every discipline, there seems to be someone who was just born to do that.
Yes. Yeah,
like
sure.
as a child, they're like above everyone else. So you think
Right.
like, okay, let me try this thing. And if that thing clicks in where I'm like, whoa, this is, I'm a really good runner. I didn't know that until I started
Right.
running. But if it doesn't click in, you're like, guess I'm not a runner. Let me try it. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
I
I would
know,
just
I
toss
know.
it aside, try something else. Like,
Yeah, it's so
fuck.
true. And then, yeah, and being in the boxing gym and seeing how many people filtered in and then quickly filtered out because they weren't good at something and without understanding you're not supposed to be good at it. It's not,
Mm-mm.
it's even if you're coordinated, you're not like you have to retrain every muscle and every muscle memory to do it properly. And so unfortunately COVID sort of got in the way of that and ended my, you know, terrible boxing career. But it was but I think to your point of like I probably haven't spent enough time being like, hey, you tried something really hard in your 40s and you learned how to do it okay. And yeah, you're not going to be heavyweight champion of the world, but that doesn't fucking matter. Just you did it. And
That's what video games
you
are
know,
for, dude.
right. Yeah.
Get to live out all your fantasies within an
Exactly,
hour
man.
if you want to.
Yeah.
But it's like when it comes to the real world, there is so much like self-validation when you like just feel that like you feel like you're in the pocket with whatever you're
Yeah.
doing, whether it's like I'm gonna try painting this thing and you just feel good, or meditating, whatever it is.
Mm,
Like
yeah.
a lot of people are doing ice baths, and I don't think they're
Right.
necessarily they know that the full extent of the health benefit and that's why they're doing it. I think they're doing it
Mm,
because it's like I'm going to challenge myself. I'm going to be the guy that
mm,
sits in an ice bath for 3 minutes, or
yeah.
like,
Right.
and that brings them internal validation that they are worthy or whatever they need.
Yeah.
But I want to talk to you about, like you said, that you got into stand up at 37. So
Yeah.
um at what point did you always think that you wanted to be a stand-up, and then the timing was better at that age, or was it something that just clicked with you where you're like, I gotta do this?
Never, ever considered it. I was a fan of it from the time I was quite a young kid. Like when Eddie Murphy's, it was either Delirious or Raw. I can't remember the first one came out. I was probably like 10 or 11 when I heard it for the first time and just listened to it obsessively and then got into like Stephen Wright and was just into in the 80s, just hugely into stand up, but never ever considered doing it. Didn't ever think I was funny. I thought funny people did stand up and then unfunny people was just like I was in that group. Like friend group, I was never the funny one. Family group, never the funny one, like ever. I could make a witty comment here or there, but anyway, I won't go into the whole story, but I'll say like
We got time.
I had a career. Like I graduated university, I graduated university with a degree in fucking English lit and philosophy. I don't know what I was thinking, and then didn't want to become a teacher, so got into publishing, and I worked in publishing for about a decade, and then I lost my job unexpectedly. I got downsized and it was fucking devastating. This was like 10 years ago. I was not prepared financially, emotionally, in any way. I was completely ill prepared for this. I literally had just got together with my girlfriend I'm still with, like 3 weeks before I lost my job. So what should have been like the honeymoon phase of our relationship was literally me at my absolute worst. I was unemployed for about 6 months, finally got a job at McMaster University in Hamilton. Fortunately, was commuting from the beaches to Hamilton, which was not a very fun commute. So
Damn.
I ended up moving to Hamilton, which I didn't know anything about Hamilton, but I was so sort of, desperate to just stay afloat and I was so in debt and blah, 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 blah. Anyway, so I moved to Hamilton without knowing anybody there, without knowing anything about the city, and I'm just sort of on my own. And my girlfriend's in Toronto, and all my friends are in Toronto. And I I was like obsessively watching not even stand up. I was obsessively watching stand ups talk about stand up. And this is like
Mm.
really kind of before podcasts really, really took off. And the thing that got me is I kept watching. HBO put out, it was only ever one episode. It was called Talking Funny. And it was Ricky
So good.
Gervais,
So
Louis
good. I saw it.
C.K., Chris Rock, and Seinfeld. Yeah, of course you
It's
do.
wild.
And I would,
When
yeah,
Seinfeld does, or was it like, I think Seinfeld like retells one of Louis' jokes
yeah,
or something
that's
on
right.
it. And I
Yeah,
was like, When I saw
it was
that,
it was a Chris Rock joke where you're
I
talking
was
about.
like, I want
yeah.
people like this to be my friends.
Yes, exactly.
This is Jerry Seinfeld doing Louis C.K.
Right. Okay. So I'm going on my vacation with my wife, my family. We pack up the car and the kids, and I'm clicking in the car seats, and I put the wife in, and I get everything set. And it's so much work to get a family in a car. I close the door for my wife on the passenger side. I walk around to the driver's side. That's my vacation.
Yeah.
Is that how it goes?
Something that's total. That's a completely Seinfelded version.
Really?
I mean, you really polished it up. You made it
Really?
nice. You made it nice.
But I
We're
was
going,
like,
yeah.
why am I obsessively watching them analyze stand up? Like that's really
Yeah.
sort of strange. And then I went in my like teens and 20s. I have a lot of really like musical friends, singer songwriters and stuff, and I would play in their bands like just as a sort of support, like rhythm guitar or bass or whatever they needed. But I always sort of wanted some sort of creative outlet, and I never found it. I couldn't really write songs. I couldn't sing. I couldn't do any of that. I wanted to be a writer, I guess, but I couldn't ever have the discipline to write. And I went away. So I was obsessively watching a lot of stand up, had a lot of time on my own, obsessively watching people talk about stand up. Went on a guys' weekend, and I told my best friends that I thought about doing stand up comedy. And that was like almost a confessional. Like I couldn't believe I told them that. And then, but also once I told them, then I felt beholden to actually trying to do it. Because I was like, oh, I gotta honor the fact that I told them that I want to do it. Anyway, I Googled that, like I got back home. It was a Monday, I was at work, Googled open mic comedy, Hamilton, saw that there was a show at a bar around the corner from me. Went to it. I'm not like a guy who goes to a bar on his own or
Did
goes
you have
anywhere.
material
Like,
prepared?
no. I wasn't planning to
Just
do
were
it.
gonna
I
go
just
check
wanted
it
to.
out?
I was
Oh,
just gonna go
nice.
check it out.
Yeah.
So I got, and I'm also crazy anxiety and crazy anxious. So if like you tell me a show is at 9, I'll be there at 8:15. Like
yeah.
just
I'm the
as an
same way.
audience member. Like I'm
yeah.
ridiculous. Like I was in university, I was the guy always in class first because I didn't want to get judged like being late or like walking. Like I'm just stupid about being early for things. So I I show up to this shitty little bar. Probably I was the only one there, and now I'm like uncomfortable, awkward, sitting on my own. And then just these random people start filtering in, and they're all sitting beside me. And I'm not overly extroverted either, like in social situations. So I'm not the type to introduce myself or put myself out there. So I just tried to stay silent. But I soon realized that all these people sitting around me were comedians. They were there to do the show. And then the host shows up and they start setting up the show. And it's this, it was a place called Cayley House in Hamilton. And then this weird guy sits beside me who has like no spatial recognition at all, and he's just like in my grill and kind of leaning on me and setting up his fucking camera, and I'm like, what is this guy? He keeps touching me, like I don't understand. And it was Manola Santanos. I had no idea. Anyway, and then they do the show, and I was really the only audience member, so they were like talking to me a lot because it was just a Monday night open mic. And then the show ended, and then they all just kind of sat around and were talking about comedy. And I had never talked about comedy ever before with anybody. And I it sounds so goddamn cheesy, but I felt like at home. Like it felt so familiar and not familiar, but comfortable. It was I've literally never felt that before, right? Where you're just like, you can have a really in-depth conversation about Hedberg with someone. And like, I didn't know other people knew about Mitch Hedberg, or were like nerdy about Mitch
It's finding
Hedberg.
your tribe, man. That's when
Yeah,
you
man.
realize,
And then,
like,
and I'm talking like, so on this night, it's Manolis is there, Gavin Stevens is there, Mace Galone, Michael Moses, Jordan Hoth, Jordan Shear, like just Devin Bateson, Anthony Malekis, like just a litany of Hamilton comedians are there. It was just crazy. Izzy Camiso, Brandon Sobel, like so many. Anyway,
big
and
names now.
yeah. I went. I was so excited. I went home and wrote a bunch of jokes. And then I was super, super excited, and I said them over the phone to my girlfriend. And she said, "It's okay, but it sounds like you're doing an impression of a comedian." which
It's
was
like we're living two similar timelines.
Really?
Yeah,
Yeah.
dead ass.
Yeah,
That was
yeah.
the first thing I got told, was that it sounded like I was doing an impression of what I thought a comedian sounded like.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
one of the first times I told I was on purpose trying to tell a joke. I
Yeah.
was telling a joke to a promoter that I was hoping to get on one of his
Oh,
shows.
that's hilarious.
And over
That's
the
so
phone, he
funny.
said, "Well, tell me one of your jokes." And it bombed. It was just, I was like, "Hello?"
That's
Like,
so
is the
funny.
signal dropping out? And he was just like, "Well, sometimes you
Oh.
just gotta jump into the deep end, right? So I'll put you on the show." And I was like, "All right, man. Thanks for the note of confidence."
And when
Yeah.
she said that to me, it scared the shit out of me because
Mm.
I thought I cared about stand up so much that I thought I can't do this inauthentically. I can't do this as if I'm doing an impression or that I'm copying someone like. And so then I got really freaked out by how do I go on stage in the most uncomfortable scenario possible and be my authentic self? Like, how do I not do an impression of someone? So it really, that idea really got into my head. So I kept going to open mics on the Monday that at Cayley House, and then every Wednesday they had amateur night at the Yucks, which is now Levity. And I would go and I'd sit in the back of the room and I would just watch. And then over time, this went on for fucking 7-8 months. I got to know everyone in the scene really well. And then they were all like encouraging me and being like, "Hey, you should do it. You should try it. You should blah, blah, blah." And I was just like, I couldn't work up the nerve. I could not do it. And then it was 8 months in, and then two things happened. Manolis from a maternal standpoint and Gavin Stevens from a paternal standpoint. Manolis was like, if you're not sure if your jokes are good, let's go out for dinner. Tell me your jokes and I'll tell you if they're good or not. And he was so sweet. And we did that. We went out, we got dinner. I told him my jokes. He was like, two of them are okay. You probably won't keep doing them, but if you need to know whether you can do this or not, you can do it. So just go and do it. And then Gavin was like, from a paternal standpoint, Gavin was just like, "Yeah, dude, it's fucking creepy that you're just coming to these shows and sitting in the back of the room. Like, just fucking do it already. Like, this is weird that you're just like coming and hanging out 8
Like an
months
open
later."
mic fanboy. Like,
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, I guess that's the thing too. Is I don't know. I was just so freaked out, and then I did it, and then I got like my second joke got like May Scaloni was hosting the night I did my first set. He set up the audience perfectly. There was like 8 fucking drunk people it was at Cayley House, that bar that I first went to. And then my second joke got a pop from the comics. And I legitimately, that was a moment of, oh shit. Wow. And then that was, I think, really the only pop I got. And then I went home and just this is so cheesy, but like the buildup of it and then the release of like actually doing it and then knowing I was going to do it again, I went home and just fucking bawled for like 5 minutes on my own because it was just so crazy. Like there was just so much
There's months
around
and
it,
months
right?
and months building to it,
Yeah,
right? Like,
yeah.
Man,
And then just also like life stuff because I lost my job and I'm in a new place and it's foreign. Anyway, there's just a lot. And then I was just and then but the best thing that ever happened to me probably was I did that cardinal sin of my second set ever was at another open mic and I went on stage with confidence. And I was like, "Oh, I'm going to kill it. I'm going to riff on like 5 new things that I've never thought about before. And I'm just going to go on stage and I'm just going to be fine." And I fucking bombed epically, like harder than anyone could bomb. It was just awful, like nothing. Just the comics looking at me like, "What are you doing?"
Like, what happened, man?
I have never, ever walked on stage with that degree of confidence ever again. And that's the best thing that could have ever happened to me. You know?
I did the same thing. I had like a stupid schedule when I was in Toronto, and there was one week where I had done like 2 shows Thursday, 2 shows Friday, 3 shows Saturday, 2 shows Sunday, and then 2 shows on Monday, and they were good. Like they were all packed shows, like good Toronto shows, like some indie, some clubs. And then I get to like the Tuesday amateur open mic at Yuck Yucks.
Right.
You know the one. And I had this like extreme confidence that I'm like, I'm going to level this room. Like, strap in. And I think I even turned to one of the Humber comics and I was like, it's gonna be fire. I go on, first joke out with so much confidence to nothing.
Yeah.
And I go,
absolutely.
it felt like I tripped. I was like, oh fuck. Because they're all like, you know, and then just tried to get something. And then after that, I was like, never again. Never again. Just feel the anxiety, man. Like, if
always.
you're anxious before on stage, just know that that's just your body going like, yeah, you got to go do this. That's why you're anxious about it. Don't have this like crazy confidence, like I'm the greatest shit, because you're gonna fail.
No, you're going to fail. Guaranteed.
It's like going into a movie with high expectations. You're always going to be let down.
Exactly.
You're always going to be let down, no matter what.
Exactly. And then I was off, and then I just kept doing it, and obviously like balancing my day job. So I've never been like a grinder, I'll say. I'm not like the 3 sets a night, like doing even as much as shows as you were just talking about, and just sort of trying to balance like being an adult, having a relationship, having a real job, having a career, and trying to fit this in and not be, not be labeled a hobbyist, because I don't think of myself as a hobbyist. I care about this just as much as any comedian does. I just don't rely on it for my main source of income. And I think starting at that later age, and I know it doesn't sound very old, but like when you start comedy at 37, your comedy peers are 21 and 22-year-olds. Right?
Yeah.
Like your actual peers are headliners. And so that's a weird dynamic too, because I never wanted to like misappropriate myself or like act like I was in, like when I moved back to Toronto I guess 7 years ago, I started to sort of meet more adults. Like, so when you sort of graduate from the open mic scene and break out of, some of the people that you're doing mics with, and you start to meet like guys my age, like Monty Scott or Nick Reynoldson or Barry Taylor, all those Comedy Records type dudes. It's like they were so much further along than I am in stand-up, but they don't have egos about it, so they don't give a shit. They're just cool dudes who like to hang out, and they don't even talk about comedy when you're hanging out. They just talk about whatever. And so that was a real sort of game changer for me, sort of like feeling like, oh, I can meet like people my age and like feel comfortable socially and whatever. So yeah,
I find that about myself now. Like, since moving to Ottawa, I've become okay. Let me, while I'm still early 30s, get like a solid like career that I can do during the day from anywhere, like hopefully remote, right? Like YouTube consulting, if anybody needs it, you know where to find me. Because I can do these YouTube consultings, pay for all my bills, live comfortably, and then go do as many shows as I want to do, right? Because I like what you're saying too about how they're not just constantly talking about comedy, and it's because they're confident in their ability to do comedy. Comedy is a thing that they do, but it's not something that they obsess over.
That's right.
That's right. Like, it's just a thing that they do, where they have other interests. Like, Barry and Nick, good example. They love basketball.
Yeah, exactly.
And they probably talk about that 24/7
all the time. Yeah,
will it inform a bit? Maybe, maybe not, but that's what makes good comedy, is like a life well lived. It's not like you don't talk about, it's so meta. You talk about comedy on stage, or like, I always hated when people would be like, so I was at this audition today, and I'm like, nobody gets what you're saying, dude. Like,
it's so true, man.
They told me that I had to do a slate, and you're like, what is this guy talking about? Like, I just got off a 12-hour shift at the factory. Like,
but how do you do? I was gonna ask you. This is me getting back into host mode. Like, I find I am, even when I'm hosting my podcast, I need to really actively be more present with my guests, because I'm so hyper vigilant around whether it's going well. Because I'm thinking about, we're getting back to validation here. I think about whether people are going to like it or not, hence validating I'm doing something good or not. And I find myself sometimes preoccupied when I'm interviewing someone thinking that, or I'm watching the clock and be like, okay, we're 28 minutes in. Like, how's
do I have any more bits here?
How much more time? Yeah. Like, I'm like, can you just be present and just like, and because I'm my natural tendency is to go to that validation piece of like, someone's going to like this or not. And that's like it permeates so many parts of it. But like for you creating so much content and accumulating so many like followers, like are you constantly, is that a stress for you thinking about
No.
like the quality of things, or are you just putting stuff out? That's great. That's
I'm the
awesome.
worst for that. My girlfriend looks at my Instagram page and she's like, "Your aesthetic is horrible. Like, what is this? Like, it's just random like screenshot." I'm like, because I don't care. Like, I don't
Right.
care. Like, and I want people who like that I don't care. That's
Yeah.
why I
Yeah, yeah.
openly don't care. Like, the smartest thing I ever heard was from Joe I wish I could pronounce his last name.
Tuchito, yeah.
Tuchito, who owns the Corner Comedy Club. It was in a back alley with like a door with no label on it and had spray paint on it. Like it looked like the door that the kitchen workers come out and like have a cigarette, go back in, you know, like right by the fryers. And I was like, why don't you get like a little sandwich board that says like, here's the door. And he goes, because the only people I want in there are the people who are brave enough to walk down an alleyway and open this door and hope that it's a comedy club.
That's so rock and roll.
And he goes, that's the clientele that I want. Like the space fits like 10 people, you know, like whoever wanders in here, they're more than welcome here. You know, like if you were willing to go through that door. And so I take that approach with like almost everything I do, like even the podcast, like the podcast is just a labor of love for me. And I think it's all about intentions. Like my intention with the podcast is to improve my patience, like improve my presence, improve like my ability to listen to people.
Yeah.
Because I think talking over people just genetically runs in my family. And I've been called out on that by friends where they'll be talking and I can't hold it in. I just push and just, because that's the family dynamic I'm used to. We're all just yelling at each other and talking over each other. But then you meet regular people and they're like, you gotta stop.
Yeah.
So the podcast is me like kind of self-awareness, being like, let me work on that.
Well, I mean, I think I've talked about this a number of times on my podcast. I don't know if this is interesting to other people, but it's interesting to me. I'm so self-conscious. I worry all the time. I used to think I was an empath, like an overly empathetic person, but I've actually just learned recently, I think I'm more like hyper vigilant. I'm more just like constantly in fight or flight mode and assessing what's going on around me and whether people are threats or whatever. I think I'm just a hyper vigilant person, but it's exhausting and I'm trying to change it. But and I've been like that. I'm like that in every setting of my life, except for fucking stand up. When I'm on stage, for whatever reason, I don't care what people think of me. I obviously want laughs. I'm not like up there like fuck you at all. I'm not that kind of comic, but I don't care. Like, and there's a spotlight on me and I have a microphone and I'm the only one facing this way. And everyone's looking at me. You would think that with that degree of hypervigilance that I would be overwhelmed or I'd be like crazy concerned about what they're thinking. And I don't care, but it's only when I'm on stage. I get immediately off stage and I slip right back into that, self-conscious person who's like worrying about every interaction and overanalyzing everything. So I talked about it with my therapist, cannot make sense of it, but it's the only time in my life where I'm actually not concerned with what people think of me. It's really weird.
I don't want to get all Johnny YouTube therapist, but unaccredited, don't listen to anything I have to say. I'm just going to give my opinion on just what you've told me thus far in this podcast. Is comedy a stable place where you don't give a fuck because that's the same reason why I love comedy. I love comedy because I know that if everything goes away, I still have it. I can still.
That's interesting.
It'll still be there.
Yeah.
Like it's still a thing that I can do, a thing that I can consume. It's like, it's very rock solid, right?
Yeah.
Whereas everything we do and like the way we act is always a direct result of like childhood trauma. You can always, 1,000% will link back to that unless something recently traumatic happened to you.
Sure.
It always is superseded by childhood trauma because it's so deep rooted, right? And the first 5 years of our lives are so important because it builds the foundation of like what we know as life. And did you say your parents got divorced when you were?
When I was 5.
You were 5. So at the ending of you forming what life is, life
Chaos.
to you is chaos and unstableness, right?
Yeah.
Like not knowing if it's going like that triggers the fight or flight. So because of that, so early on, it could be why you have that just naturally with everything outside of stand up. But if you like, you know, it sounds crazy, but like after I took mushrooms, it was like this rewiring of my brain where it was kind of like everything is just mind over matter.
Yeah.
Like you can there's a real thing where there's a reason why, you know, Jim Carrey like wrote down a check for $10 million and was like, I'm going to get this, and then lands 3 of the top movies ever, like right in a row, and he does all of them and he makes that exact same amount of money. Like it's crazy. So I'm like, the amazing thing is once you know that about yourself, like that's how I quit smoking. I smoke a vape, which I need to stop next, but like I quit smoking by just telling myself like you don't need it.
Yes.
You're not
right.
Unidentifying yourself with the trauma. You're not a smoker. You don't have an extreme amount of anxiety like you think that needs the cigarettes. You don't need it. And then so I just literally stopped going out and buying them because I told myself that I'm not a smoker.
Yeah. Interesting.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I totally do. I mean, I think that there's a lot of truth in that. I also think like with stand up, no one told me I should do it. No one helped me to do it necessarily. Obviously, I got aid along the way in the form of Gavin and Manolis, like I talked about earlier. But no one was like, "Oh, and support." Like, yeah, you're going to do this, or like, here's how you do it. We're going to help, or whatever. Like, it was all just me. And anything I go and do on stage, it's literally all just me. It's just what I come up with, and so maybe there's a bit of that to it too. Maybe there's also, I don't think I'm conscious of this, but I think maybe there's a little bit of, that look that audience members have, like where sometimes you can see they're picturing what it would be like if they went up on stage. And they just want it to be, they want you to do so well because they don't want it to be awkward. And they're picturing, if I was up there, I'd be shitting my pants right now. And it'd be
you're an extension of them.
Yeah.
That's what they call secondhand embarrassment.
Completely.
You feel embarrassed for them if they do bad. You're like,
exactly. And so maybe it's a little bit of I'm up here doing this, like, and you're not. And I'm not sure exactly what it is, but
no, I think like it's exactly what you said. It's because like you have been in control of it since the beginning. Like deciding that, you could have surrounded yourself with any type of interviews. It could have been guys talking about truck parts, and then you got really into cars, like you chose comedy, and like there's a reason for that. And it was because it was like you're trying to lead yourself down this path to one day be a comedian, right?
Yeah,
like
exactly.
For so long, I thought I was going to be a wrestler, like WWE.
Oh, really?
Like,
wow.
Loved the WWE, and I would just obsessively read like autobiographies and like make my parents buy like the DVDs and VHS when they came out or whatever, or rent them from Blockbuster, because I was like I wasn't watching it, I was studying it.
That's
I was funny. Like how, and I would like suplex my brother on the couch and shit, just like really trying to live it, right? Like and then so I realized like, oh, I'm doing the same thing with comedy, but I can actually apply myself in a way where my body won't be physically harmed, because I did go to like a wrestling training school in Ottawa, and I trained for like a year. But at 18, when I had back pain, I was like, I can't see myself still doing this. I'm getting back pain from training. Like, no way, not a chance. I dipped out of that real quick. I was like, no, keep the money. I don't care.
Damn, man.
Yeah,
that's great.
But I would have hated myself for not trying it, though.
Of course,
right? Like even if I still found comedy, I would still be like, but what if?
Yeah, for sure, man. Yeah.
What if I learned how to take a front bump? That was the hardest thing. The front flips where you land on your back.
Oh yeah, I can imagine.
Like we were talking about earlier, where there's like these natural tendencies that we have. Like when you fall, you put your hands in front of you.
Yeah.
It's like same thing when you do a somersault. You're like kind of covering yourself. You tuck and you roll. And so it's like relearning how to do a somersault in the air.
That's wild. Yeah.
It was insane to me, though, that like someone could teach me how to break one of those like things that were just stuck in you. Like you could feel my body pulling back against trying to to flip over, and then they can just do it in steps, and all of a sudden now you can do a front flip.
Yeah,
You know,
it's
like,
wild.
yeah,
Crazy.
it's
That's cool,
there's a
man.
lot of similarities actually between the wrestling business and comedy.
Yeah.
Like the wrestlers, for anyone watching, amateur wrestlers will go to other amateur wrestling shows. They'll ask the manager, like, can I help you set up at all? Do you need a referee?
Wow.
Like, how can I help out to be on your show? Then they'll try to
That's
get booked on
crazy.
their shows. Everyone like does soft handshakes with each other too. Because if
Mm.
you're a big, intimidating guy, you do a soft handshake so that the other guy knows you're not going to kill him. You know, it's like, there's like
wild.
these little things
Yeah.
like in the community that it's just so funny to me. And like the crossover.
That's hilarious, man. That's great. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, and now it's, when you and I did a show at Absolute recently, I've just started hosting. I think that's like a new muscle that I'm learning, because I'm very, like, when it comes to stand up, or at least I had been pre-COVID, very about my jokes, and like bring my notebook on stage and do the jokes that I write out in my notebook. And so now this is forcing me to step out of my comfort zone a little bit and try to do this piece, which is, adds just an entire different layer to it. And talking about validation, like trying to figure out if you're a good host or not, because being a good
Yeah.
host is different than being a good comic.
Yeah.
I just finished doing a week at the Toronto Club hosting, and I think on the Wednesday night or Thursday night, someone came up to me and was like, "Hey, you were really funny. You should try stand-up comedy sometime." And I was like, "Yeah, that's cool.
I
Thanks."
love that
But,
common misconception that
I
people
know.
think the host is not a comedian.
It's so great. It's actually, when you're nervous hosting, it's actually great, because
It's
the bar
great.
is set so
Yeah,
low.
yeah.
Like, they're like, "Oh, they don't think you're a comedian at all." So just
Yeah.
go up there. But I think, like, yeah,
I
go
was
ahead.
gonna say I've emceed weddings and hosted
Yeah.
like other just award events like for local businesses or whatever. And it's great knowing that they are not expecting you to be funny. So anytime you make a joke, it just kills in the room.
Crushes.
Like,
Yeah. That's funny. But and I think, like, I don't know, the benefit of like starting this at a later age too is like not taking anything for granted. Not like, I'm not rushing towards becoming a headliner. I'm like, I spent several years as a middle, and just learning the craft of like doing club comedy and like how to do well as a middle act. And then now the focus is how to be the best host I can possibly be. And then the headlining thing will be there. I'm not thinking about it. I'm not a headliner yet. I don't have the time. I don't have the ability. I'm not that funny yet. And so I'm pleased that I can at least have the discipline to like not rush ahead, because again, talking about validation, I see a lot of people in our business who want that validation of, I'm a headliner,
yeah.
or I've done Just for Laughs, or I've done this,
Yeah.
or whatever. And it's
It makes
like,
you feel important.
yeah.
That's the thing that always worries me too about like the JFL showcases is like, you have to remember, if you're auditioning for one of these things, this impression that you make on those talent scouts might be the only thing that they remember you as.
Yep.
And in let's say 5 years, you get another showcase if you don't get this one, and you've let's say 10, like you're so much better as a comedian, like infinitely better than you were 5 years before that. They're still gonna have that image probably from that first show. Oh yeah, I remember. Oh, wasn't that the person that did?
Yeah.
And so it's like really about knowing like I'm ready for that. I can handle this. Like
That's right.
If this happened in the US, they had like I can't remember the name of the stand-up comedy competition, but I think Eliza Schlesinger won it. And even she was like, man, I was only a year and a half or something into comedy. She was like only a couple of years into comedy. She did not have an hour ready, but she got so much fame from winning that people were like, when are you going on tour?
Right.
So she just had to like become a headliner overnight.
Jesus.
And it's like, I wish that upon nobody.
Oh God,
like,
no. So stressful.
That is so stressful. Like, let me get an hour first of like, let it take 15 years, let it take 20 years before I get an hour that's solid,
Yeah, exactly.
And then I'll do the tour thing. But it's like,
until
then.
I just had this is going to sound like shameless promo for my show, but my episode this week is with fellow Ottawa comedian Matt Carter, who was great, and Alex would describe Matt Carter as the least successful comedian. because he's never done Just for Laughs. He's not a touring pro. He's not headlining all over the country. He's not going down to the States. He does stand up when he wants to. He does really well. He's been at it long enough that he knows how to do it, blah, blah, blah. And I was sort of like, yeah, that's not a bad milestone to try to go for at this stage. Do you know what I mean? Like, to do stand up whenever you want, to do well, to do the stand up you want to do, to have people come up to you after a show and be like, that was really great. Again, it's validation, but it's kind of not a terrible feeling. And so, it's not about necessarily someone asked me what my credits were last night. I was like, I have none. I have no credits. What do
you want me to say about you? I have a podcast.
I do hate when people lie. When I'm being introduced, that happens at Absolute a lot. I'm like, the MC will be like, coming up the stage, this guy's toured all over Canada and he's done I'm like, no, I haven't. Like, what are you telling them that for? But I don't know where I was going with that. It's more just the validation.
Yeah.
Validation. Yeah.
I had last night, shout out Joe Bowman, who was hosting the Cornwall show.
Great.
He brought me on stage of said a bunch of stuff, very kind stuff, but then he was like, and Netflix is taking all of his shit. Give it up for Johnny Rogers. I heard audibly a woman go, what? Like, she was genuinely asking. And as I'm going to the stage, I'm like, I have no material about that. Just happened.
Yeah.
I'm gonna need a minute to process it.
That's
Maybe
crazy.
It's gonna be a legal case. Like,
oh my God. We have to talk about that when you come on my podcast. I would love to dive into that stuff. That would be great.
Yeah. Fucking Netflix and Discovery Plus both just took my content. No accreditation, no out of context, made me look like a conspiracy theorist. So,
oh my God, that's so
fucking
crazy,
insane,
man. That's so nuts.
JJ Lieberman though messages me. I don't know if you know. Do you know JJ?
Yeah,
right?
I know JJ.
Yeah. He was like, "Thanks for lowering what having a Netflix credit means." And I was like, JJ, I didn't ask for this. I didn't audition for this. And I was like, I'm going to sue them. And he goes, that's the problem with you Canadian comics. He goes, just take credit. Just take the credit.
I love JJ, but he's also just such a fucking asshole.
He's insane. But that's what I love about comedy is like, like these are just colleagues, like they don't have to be your friends. Like they're just people you work with, and you get to work with some of the craziest motherfuckers you've ever met in your life.
It's nuts.
I wouldn't want it any other way. Like
I know. It's incredible, isn't it?
It's pretty fucking incredible. It's just nuts.
I know, man. Yeah.
There's a question that I always ask my guests towards the end of the podcast, and if you can make a phone call to 15-year-old Nick and give him a piece of advice based on what you know now, but it doesn't affect your current timeline, what would you tell him?
It'll be vague, but I'll hone in. I'd say like none of what you think matters. And I guess this kind of dovetails into like how I started. Like, attention from girls doesn't matter. Your ability at sports doesn't matter. Your ability to be creative doesn't matter. What people think of you doesn't matter. None of those things truly matter. If you want to be happy, be like the best friend to yourself that you possibly can be. And don't spend the next 30 years of your life. Like this isn't an original thought, but like I've often heard this, that if I had someone in my life who talked to me the way I talk to me, I would think they were the worst person, the most evil, vile person in the world. Why do I allow that to happen? And so I'd say my 45-year-old self goes back to my 15-year-old self and be like, could you just be nice to yourself? That's actually all that matters. Just be nice to yourself is the only thing that matters.
Yeah, truly. Like, speak to yourself like you were your own best friend. Like, what advice would you give your best friend right now? Where you're really looking out for their interests, you know, and like, them and you know everything about them. So like, give advice based on that. No judgment, none of that shit. Like, and invest in Bitcoin. That's what I'd also tell.
Is that still? I don't know anything about it. Is that still a thing?
I love when there's people that are like, "What's?"
I'm old. Still going on? I don't know. I look at like all. I was researching this show today just to prepare a little bit, and I was like, Wow, 10,000 followers on Instagram and like over 1,000 followers. Like, I don't know. These
It's all
numbers
Russian
are
bots. Don't
okay,
believe the
gotcha.
numbers ever. So on Instagram specifically, I talked about this before on this podcast, but I like being very transparent with people.
Mm.
The numbers on YouTube, legit. The numbers
Yeah.
on Instagram, back a couple years ago, they made it so that like if you want to put a link in your stories, you had to have at least 10,000 followers or whatever.
Interesting.
And I was like, well, that's dumb because
Yeah.
like I want to use that to promote shows, shout out new
Sure.
videos. Like it has so many uses. So I had that. I think I had like 6,000 or something. I just found a site and typed in, I need 4,000 buy, and I just got a bunch of bot fucking followers. And now suddenly I can use the link in the description. And then
Jesus.
fast forward to 2021, they make it just part of it. I was
Right.
like,
Yeah. Right. So
I was like, you assholes. I was like, it should have been that all along. They just make an update and make it part of it. And I was like, all right, bet.
We can finish with this. I started my podcast, I guess, just over 2 years ago. I'm 108 episodes in now. Early on, like I think under 20 episodes. It was at the start of the pandemic. And I reached out to one of my comedy heroes and asked if he would come on. I'd only met him once, and it was Mike Wilmot. And he immediately responded and said he would do the podcast. And I started to shit my pants incredibly. I was like, Jesus Christ. Because I met Mike only one time. I grew up watching him on Just for Laughs, and he was the first Canadian I ever really saw do it. And then was at an open mic and ran into him and kind of, fanboyed over him, whatever. Anyway, he comes on my podcast. And I was so new at the time of hosting, and I was so nervous and in my head about having him on. And I asked him a similar type question, like you could go back and tell your younger self something about stand-up, like what would you? And he started to answer, and then he just went into, he's like, what would I go back and say to my? What is there, a fucking time machine? You're going to say there's an existence of a goddamn time machine, and you're going to want to know what I'm going to say to my younger self when there's a fucking time machine? And he just went on this tirade about time machines in this non-existent world. And I felt like it was amazing. It was,
that's so funny. Yeah. I love Mike. I remember like pandemic show that like Puff Mama was doing. It was like an outside like courtyard in Chinatown.
Yeah.
And I was there just like helping her with sound and stuff, and like it was me, Patrick Fishman, and Mike just like leaving there. We were just walking the same way, and I'm same as you. I'm like, I can't believe I'm fucking just walking with Mike Wilmot. You know what I mean? Like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
And we're going to like find some place to like get a beer, and I'm like, this is gonna be fucking awesome. We pull up to we go to one place, and they're closed. And then Mike goes, well, guess I'm just going to go home. I was like, oh, God damn it. I was like, wasn't meant to be. Wasn't meant to happen. It was like a good little chat on the way over to a bar, and then just no desire to pursue any other.
It's so great. That open mic I did with him, it was this open mic in the east end of Toronto that was run before the pandemic. And it was like on a Friday night, and I planned to just go and do a bunch of new jokes. And I knew there wasn't going to be a lot of audience people there. So just try some stuff out, very low stakes, whatever. And then Mike shows up, and I never met him before. And I was like, God damn it, Jesus Christ. Now I don't want to do my new stuff because he's here or whatever.
Yeah.
And so the hosts are introducing me, and all of a sudden Wilmot comes up over my shoulder and whispers in my ear. And he was like, what are you, nervous? How you feeling, kid? And I was like, yeah, I don't know, I'm not feeling very good. And he just goes, well, just remember, if you were any good, you wouldn't be on this fucking show. And they say my name, they intro me. So now like one of my comedy heroes has completely just leveled me as I'm walking to I just walked up ashen. Just like a goddamn go. It was wild.
Like, you're already flipping through like what you're gonna do as a set, and then you get that confidence.
He just told me that I'm a terrible comedian, and I'm on this awful show. It was great. It was fantastic.
But, it was like one of my favorite recordings that I have from like Vape on the Lake was doing a show, and I'm listening back to it, and I hear Mike Rita whisper into the microphone, "You fucking suck, buddy." fucking
assholes.
the way I laughed, like just hearing that on the subway home to myself, like what the
Jesus
fuck?
Christ.
Like this is
Oh my
so
God.
funny.
That's
Like
so
I love
wild.
being around people like this.
We're such assholes.
It's great though, because then when you meet regular assholes, it doesn't
true.
break you the same
Yes.
way. You're
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
you
yeah, very
think
true.
you could talk shit to me right now? Like I could talk circles around you right now,
Yeah.
sir. Like
Absolutely.
you
Yeah,
know, you
that's
have this
so true,
confidence in real life. You're like,
It's so true.
this guy's gonna try to say something to me.
Yeah.
I'm gonna shout out all your socials for the people watching.
Cool.
nickdurie.com. Check
Yep.
out the website. Check out the podcast starting out at
Yep.
Nick Durie on Instagram and at
That's
Nick
right.
Durie on Twitter.
Yeah, I'm not that prolific, but I'm prolific with my podcast. I do it weekly. I took the month of February off because I was in Australia and New Zealand for work, but other than that, I haven't missed a week. So 108 episodes in, and I got a few more booked, and hopefully having Mr. Johnny Rogers on soon, which would be great, man.
That'd be sweet.
To chop it up with you. And
Flip the
thank you for
interview.
having me on. This was
Yeah,
great.
of
Yeah,
course.
Flip
Yeah.
it. Yeah. See
I
how
always
well you
say
can
to
do
comics
yes.
too. I was like, any comedians out there, like you want to come on the show, just ask me. You know,
Yeah, me too.
I'm not
Yeah.
gonna reach out. Like I'm just
Yeah.
I am so bad with that. Like it's literally like just if it comes to mind, I'm like, yeah, let me talk to this person this week. Like because like I said, just labor of love. I'm like, just who do I want to chat with this week? That's what I'm gonna do. Yeah.
Oh, here's another message to comedians if you're listening to this. If I reach out to, because I do reach out to a lot of comedians to ask them to come on mine. I've had very, very few people actually be like, "Hey, can I be on your podcast?" It's happened occasionally, but not that often. If I reach out to you and say, "Hey, would you like to come on my podcast?" Don't just fucking ignore me. That makes me feel the worst. I could pause. Just say not really interested. It's not going to hurt my feelings.
What's worse though, a red message or just a thumbs up?
A thumbs up is fucking brutal.
I'm like, kill yourself.
I had someone give me a thumbs up who stood me up twice, and I'm not going to say who it was, but it was like, I'm never asking again.
Please tell me.
Anyway,
yeah. That's with the podcast, everybody. Go check out Nick Durie's podcast starting out. Subscribe to the patreon.com/the Johnny Rogers. Like I said, exclusive episodes all there. But for now, I've been your host, Johnny Rogers, and I'll see you on the next one.
You've been listening to The Johnny Rogers Show. New episodes air every Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.